Hi, this is Group 8, and we are going to discuss about the impact of tariff on the aluminum industry in Canada. Our team members are myself, Kusal Sharma Vasgai, Suzanne Singh, Nikita Amikumar Lalwani, Isha Hitesh Pai Prasanna, and Rupesh Sai. And this is the table of content. This is the background of the presentation. We are going to discuss its product selection and research, supply chain challenges, strategic solutions, case study on Rio Tinto, and the conclusion and references. And this is the executive summary where we are going to assess the impact of US and US aluminum tariff from 2018 to 2025. So Canada is Rio Tinto is one of the world's largest aluminum producers, and its supply chain has a short-term impact of the tariff is that it has increased the supply chain cost due to the 25% of US tariff, and it has put a risk to the 1,500 jobs in Canada. Similarly, its competitive advantage is that the smelters are 25% more efficient. And our recommendation from this presentation as a whole would be to expand long-term partnership with non-US markets. So the data collection method we use are that we primarily use credible online sources, including government websites, industry publications, and news articles. We also refer recent research papers and market reports related to aluminum trades and tariff, and no interviews were conducted, but all information were secondary and publicly available. And the first part is the product selection and research. So the product is aluminum, and looking at the matrix, the aluminum exports to Canada, the total aluminum exports of Canada overall were $11.5 billion, of which 9.4 billion were to US, and the US share and the Canada's share of US aluminum exports as a whole is 50%. So it is the highest supplier of aluminum to Canada. And looking at the figures from 2020 to 2024, it has gradually increased from 26.9 billion in 2020 to 11.5 billion in 2024, the exports of aluminum to Canada, to US. So talking about the 2018 to 2025 US tariff, in March of 2018, the US imposed 10% aluminum tariff under Section 232, citing the reasons for national security. And there were some temporary exemptions given to Canada and Mexico during that time. But the basic reason for applying the tariff upon Canada was to curb the unfair trade and global overcapacity. So, as an opposed move from Canada, its citing is aluminum in U.S. industry and no security threat were one of the major reasons. And talking about the 2025 tariff timeline, U.S. lifted the aluminum tariffs under USMCA in 2019, but reinstated 25% of tariffs in 2025 of February. And the White House cited that the 2018 policy had loopholes and some exemptions they wanted to get rid of. And talking about its impact of the tariff impact on Rio Tinto, Rio Tinto's Kitty Mat spent exports 80% to the US, now subject to 25% tariffs. And Rio Tinto plans to shift the export to Europe and Asia under CETA to avoid the tariff that US has imposed and to expand the business. And from the legislation side, Canada and BC are already working with Rio to find an export market. And the timeline on the tariff and the latest development are here. And in March of 2025, US imposed a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel exports. And then March 13, Canada imposed a retaliatory tariff of 25% on US aluminum and steel. And on April 2, Canada confirmed a 25% tariff on non-CUSMA compliant aluminum, and on June 4th, this is the latest development, US increased the aluminum and steel tariff from 25% to 50%. And the basic reasons that US has given for the increase in tariff is to curb the dumping of subsidized aluminum from China and other countries. And the domestic aluminum capacity fell to 55% by 2023, triggering protection efforts from US to promote their own aluminum industry in the country. And the scrap aluminum imports also surged by 30% in Q1 of 2024, which benefited US recyclers. and the industry groups pushed for stronger protection to revive the domestic smelting inside US. But among these tariffs, UK was exempted under the new bilateral deal, suggesting targeted application, which means that there were some countries except UK who were also exempted, but not US, not Canada. And to talk about the next part of the presentation, Isha would be here.
Thank you, Kushal. Let's talk about part two, supply chain challenges. Next slide, please. Uh, Supply chain challenges. Rio Tinto, a global mining giant, faces several supply chain challenges in Canada. First, labor shortage in remote mining location, disparate productions and logistics, making it difficult to maintain steady operation. Second, indigenous land disputed create a delay as negotiation and protests impact mining activities and transportation routes. Third, aging infrastructure like railway and port system slow down shipment of critical materials such as iron ore and aluminum. Fourth, strict environmental regulation increase compliance cost and slow down project approval, affecting supply chain efficiency. Fifth, energy supply issue, including high cost and reliance on renewable, pose challenges for melting operation in Quebec and British Columbia. Finally, global marketing violating impact demand for Canadian mined commodities, forcing Rio Tinto to constantly adapt its supply chain strategy. Next slide, please. Rio Tinto's sourcing and production impact in Canada. Rio Tinto Canadian operation plays a crucial role in its global supply chain, but particularly in sustainable aluminum production. Thus, the company's hydropower melters like British Columbia's works and produce some of the world's lowest carbon aluminum, a key selling point for eco-conscious markets. However, Rio Tinto faces criticism in Quebec, where iron ore mining has raised concern over tailing and ecosystem damage. To counter this, the company has invested in recycling initiatives like its closed-loop aluminum system for automakers. Labor disputes such as 2021 strike at Kitimet's melter have disputed production and strained workers' relations. Yet Rio Tinto is doubling down on Canada, expanding into lithium mining in Quebec to meet demand for green energy minerals. While Rio Tinto Canadian's operation showcase innovation in sustainable sourcing, balancing growth with environmental and social responsibility remains a challenge. That's all from my side. Now I would like to hand it over to Bhupesh.
Thank you so much, Isha. Today, I'll briefly cover the transportation and inventory challenges in Canada's aluminum industry, along with border risk from inflation, trade instability, and shifting demands. Recently, US tariffs on aluminum, now at 25%, have made cross-border trade more expensive and complex. To manage this, Canadian companies are turning to bonded warehouse and US foreign trade zones to delay or reduce duty payments. At the same time, routing export to Europe, Asia increases both shipping costs and delivery times, adding friction to the supply chain. On the risk side, inflation is the major concern. US buyers now pay more for Canadian aluminum, which leads to higher prices for consumers and declining demand. Within the months of these tariffs hikes, we have already seen order cancellation and supply disruption. This is creating a real instability for producers like Rio Tinto, which exports 80% of its output to US and now faces lower demand and potential job losses. There is also a long-term risk of losing market share if US companies switch suppliers permanently. So how Canada is responding? Next slide, please. Next slide. So companies are diversifying markets, like targeting Europe, Asia, and partners under CPTPP and CETA through higher transport costs. Costs remain a challenge. They are also using customs tools like bonded warehouse and FTZs to reduce tariffs impacts. Strategically, there is a shift towards adding more value at home, investing in local processing and finishing to reduce reliance on raw export and increase domestic benefit. Finally, Canadian firms and officials are pushing for policy change through USMCA and WTO channels, seeking exemption and fairer trade terms. In short, while challenges remain, Canada's aluminum industry is adapting with smart logistics, market diversification, and policy advocacy. So for to cover next part, my friend will take over after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhupesh. Now I'll continue by talking about the strategic solutions Rio Tinto is using to overcome the challenges from tariffs. Rio Tinto is working to reduce its reliance on US buyers by expanding into new markets. They are focusing on Europe, Asia, and India, where free trade agreements help lower or remove tariffs. To handle the extra costs from US tariffs, they are also using bonded warehouses and special trade zones. These allows them to store aluminium and delay paying duties and until they are ready to sell. Finally, Rio Tinto is also changing its transportation routes. They are shipping through Pacific ports to reach Asia and Atlantic ports to serve Europe. All of these moves are helping the company keep global customers and reduce risks. Next slide. Besides reaching new markets, Rio Tinto is also focusing on adding more value to its product here in Canada. They are investing in local aluminum processing like rolling and extrusion before exporting. They are also using advanced technology like ELYSIS, which produce aluminum with zero emissions. Another advantage is their AP60 smelter in Quebec, which increases output by 25% compared to older technology. And to deal with tariffs, Rio Tinto is also making joint supply contracts with US buyers. By working together, they can share the extra costs and reduce the impact on both sides. Next slide. Along with logistics and partnerships, Rio Tinto is also using financial tools to manage costs. They are delaying duty payments through the trade zones and using letters of credit and insurance to protect their cash flow. On the government side, they are also asking for tax breaks here in Canada to help with higher costs. They are also working with trade officials to negotiate for better deals with the US, including phased tariff relief in the future. Overall, these financial and policy actions help Rio Tinto stay competitive while facing the challenges of global tariffs. That overcomes the main strategies Rio Tinto is using. Now I will like to pass to Nikita, who will continue the next part of our presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan. Now I'll cover the part, the Rio Tinto analysis. Next slide. Okay, so here I'm going to explain you how the strategic and financial outcome metrics have affected the Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto is managing the tariff challenge by doubling down on long-term investments and market diversification. As you can see in the picture, I have already explained how strong their financials were, how they were affected by tariffs, and how they went down. So, what strategy they used? Diversified strategy, that is, investing in both US and Canadian operations. Another was using a P60 smelter in Quebec, first new Western smelter in 16 years. CEO stance, that is, tariffs are manageable if applied globally, but damaging if Canada is uniquely targeted. Backup plan what they had was redirect aluminum export to US, Asia if US demands drop. The second thing that I'll be using is financial outcome metrics. That is, despite global tariff threats, Rio Tinto remained financially strong in 2024. Even with an estimated US $3 billion tariff cost, they maintain healthy earnings thanks to strong performance in our other segments like iron and copper. Main points which they I'm going to convert in the, explain in this, like in 2024 production, Their production was 3.27 million tons of aluminium. Realized LME aluminium price was US dollars 2200 to 2300 per ton. Estimated tariff cost impact was like from US 2.5 to 3 billion if applied 25% on Canadian exports. That is come to the net income of in 2024 of US dollars 10 billion. Next comes this effectiveness of strategy and recommendation. Rio Tinto is taking the right step but can improve by building long-term partnership outside the US and investing more in domestic process to avoid exporting raw aluminium. Using financial tools like hedging and supply chain tools like FTZs will also strengthen their resilience. The main points will be like strategy is flexible and diversified, a sound response. Secure long term deals in Europe, Asia to stabilize the demands. Secure long term deals in Europe, Asia to stabilize the demand. Expanding downstream processing to add value domestically. Use FCZs and bonded warehouse to reduce tariff exposure. Use price hedging to manage volatility. Now let's come to the conclusion. To sum up this, Rio Tinto is navigating a trade turbulence well. Their proactive approach, investing in efficient assets and staying globally connected, positions them strongly for the future. And here comes the references. All data in this presentation is supported by the credible sources, including financial report, industry analysis, and the government publications. Thank you. This is all from us. And we are open for the questions also.